My bad.
No worries.
It's important that we do a cheers before. It's a ritual, it's a rite, it's a tradition.
Why not?
And those are crucial.
Yes.
And our good buddy who we're going to be discussing today really makes clear how important those things are.
The importance of rituals, yes.
Of rites, of traditions, of passing them down, you know?
Well, you may have guessed it, or maybe not.
It is in the title of the video. It is in the text that's floating above our heads a second ago.
And today's video is going to be about Fustel de Coulange.
Our good buddy Fustel.
Wow. Now, Fustel de Coulange is an expert on the classics. He's an expert on Greek and Roman
and Indian,
not only mythology, but system, judicial system,
institutions, sociology,
rights, constitutions,
traditions, rituals, family, cult, religion. These are all intrinsic. They are one and the same. In our modern minds, we might be tempted to say that these are different and distinguishable. But in the mind of Fustel de Coulange, in the mind which has studied the ancient city, these are inseparable. They are one and the same. And that is the book that we're going to be tearing into today. We're going to rip the flesh off the bones of this book, The Ancient City by Fustel de Coulange.
Completely.
An investigation into cult, family, tradition, a book that reveals the truth about religion.
About religion and its link to the judicial system and to family. So, let's get back to the basics. So, Fustel de Coulange discusses first and foremost the Indo-European civilization. The Indo-European civilization is the ancestor of both what we could call nowadays in our modern lexicon the Indian sphere of influence, the Indian culture, as Kissinger would call it, or and the European sphere of influence. So those two big civilizations had a common ancestor that was
the Indo-European,
which was the Indo-Europeans,
who inhabited Central Asia roughly, and then over time migrated into the Balkans and spread throughout the European continent.
Completely. So those people had certain types of rites and rituals. For example, we see a lot, for example, in the Olympic flames, right?
The Olympic flame.
The Olympic flame, right? During the Olympic game that is happening
this year
in Paris, right? They've already lit up the flame, correct?
And there's a lot of significance to that. It's not just spectacle. There's an ancient significance to that.
So we could say that in ancient civilizations, especially the Indo-European civilization, well, the flame was a symbol. It was called the foyer, le foyer.
Or in English, the hearth.
The hearth.
Yes.
So the hearth was the spirit of the ancestors. So we need to understand correctly that for the ancients, when we talk about the ancients with the capital A, we're talking about the Greeks. And the Greeks, as we know, are the founders of Western civilizations.
They're our common ancestor in the West.
And the common ancestors of the Greeks and the Indian
and the Romans,
who
themselves were ancestors of the Greeks. Let's face it. Yeah, descendants of the Greeks. Let's face it.
Correct. From the lineage of
Virgil. Yes.
So we know that the Romans were descendants, at least culturally, spiritually, and judicially, of the Greeks. Now, the Greeks were the descendants of the Indo-Europeans. The Indo-Europeans had a certain structure in their lives. So the flame represented the spirit of the ancestors. Everything was around the family structure. So we need to understand, in today's society, how was society? We've discussed, of course, before that in our Hobbes video, The State of Nature. Hobbes used to believe, of course, that
individuals are self-centered, selfish, and as a result they clash with one another, making life brutish, nasty, and short, which therefore justifies the institution of government.
Completely. But how did the state develop? So first of all, there was a family. That family has certain rites and rituals. For example, the elder son was the guardian of the right, the guardian of the religion, the elder son. So the elder son used to pass that right, that ritual, that, I would say, heritage to his elder son, And that would continue until we would form a tribe. Then the tribe would develop itself into becoming a kingdom. And the eldest son, would be the king. So the continuation of eldest sons would bring the chief of the tribe, first of all. The family becomes a tribe, then the tribe becomes a kingdom. And who is the king in ancient civilizations, and even, we could even say in some modern countries? The king is the eldest son of the family that developed the cult, the rituals of the modern state. And let's be clear, the judicial system is a consequence of the religion.
Yes.
And let's talk about the religion.
Because religion is at the essence of everything that Fustel de Coulanges talks about.
Yes. Why?
Before we have the religions of our day, there was a religion which is more ancient than all of them, more crucial than all of them, more consequential than all of them. It is the religion which is, as you noted, passed down by the eldest son, inherited by the eldest son, through what is called primogeniture.
So it was a family religion.
The domestic religion. The essence of religion lies in the domestic religion.
So the Romans, Fustel de Coulanges, we need to understand it. He's talking about the Indo-Europeans and how the influence of your Indo-Europeans tradition translated itself through the ages to the Greeks and then the Romans. So we still nowadays, without even knowing it, still uphold certain traditions of the Indo-Europeans and therefore of the Romans and the Greeks. For example, the law of the elder son. Why is the eldest son in some societies and in some, I would say, structures, even state structures, monarchies, modern monarchies,
or even a corporation? You can imagine the CEO handing down the reins of the company to his son.
Why the eldest son? Because that's a heritage of the Indo-Europeans. The oldest son was the guardian of the religion. And
he was the keeper of the flame.
The keeper of the flame.
Yes.
Let's get into it. So the religion was something familiar. It was the cult of the ancestors.
The cult of the ancestors.
Before becoming the cult of a common god, we need to understand that gods were considered as being the ancestors.
God was not something abstract. God was something you could relate yourself to. God was the essence of your line. God was the ancestor that established your family, that established your land. That is who your God was. And so each family was centered around a worship of their ancestors, of their founders, of those people who gave their essence to all those who descended from them.
Completely. Exactly. So each family had a god. And the god was considered as the founder of the family. For example, nowadays we have last names. And our last names for certain families would describe a certain common ancestor that was the pioneer, that was the founder of our lineage. Well, back in the days, we're talking about 6,000 years or even more than that, the Indo-Europeans had a certain cult of their ancestors. For them, a human being was just a piece of a long chain. Each piece of the chain was representing the generations. And for them, a human being was to be sanctified once he was dead. Once he was dead, he was supposed to be sanctified by his descendants.
His eldest son, specifically.
Specifically, the eldest son was the one who was the chief of the rite and the rituals of the religious ceremonies.
He was the priest. He was the priest of the domestic religion.
He was
of
the
family.
high priest of the domestic religion. So we need to understand correctly. First, there was a family. The family became bigger and bigger. It developed into becoming a tribe. The tribe needed some structure. That structure was preserved to a centralized power that was
the eldest son,
the
high priest of
who
the
was
domestic.
not only the guardian of the political order, but let's think of it clearly. The political order was a consequence
of the domestic religion.
So politics was a consequence of religion. And what was religion back at that time?
The worship of the ancestors.
The worship of the ancestors. Now, afterwards, Fustel de Coulanges discusses that in his book, The Ancient City, La Cité Antique in French, that the Greeks, for example, once they developed themselves into being big tribes, they needed to unite between different tribes. So they decided to form cities. The tribe became a city.
The oikos became a polis.
Nice, exactly. So how would we unite different tribes with different cults, religions, and let's say it one more time. The religion is the cult of the ancestor. So we need to have common gods,
Yes.
common ancestors. Who are our common ancestors right now?
The Indo-Europeans. No, in the West we could say it's the Greeks.
Like when the tribes of the Greeks, the different tribes, the Indo-European tribes decided to form cities. They needed common ancestors, common gods. So they created Athena,
Zeus, Heracles.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. That is how they have linked their different domestic religion into a polis. Polis meaning the city.
Polis is a complicated term that we'll touch on later. But let's examine also, since we're looking at ancient Greece, the effect of geography. We know how geography can affect, not just affect, determine the destiny of a nation and the destiny of a people. What was the geography of Greece and how did it contribute to this isolation and formation of domestic religions? The Attican Peninsula and all of the Mediterranean, Balkanic region in general is extremely mountainous. It's extremely mountainous, right? So property, it was very easy to define what property was. Property was what was divided by mountain ranges, right? You could say, what is past this mountain is yours, what is past this mountain is mine. Very simply. And so political communities would form themselves around those small patches of arable soil, which were lotted in between the mountains. And with the mountains between them, it was very easy for each plot of agriculture to develop their own domestic religion and to feel alienated from that of the others. There are exceptions, of course. For example, between Sparta and Argos in the Peloponnesian Peninsula, there is no vast mountainous range.
Argos, again, was a colony of Sparta.
Yes.
But so
Argos, it was easier for these people to intermingle.
Argos was a colony of Sparta, but still, due to the environment, they've had different ways of life.
Yes. We notice how geography determines the destiny of a people, but the beliefs of a people might determine it even more.
Completely.
That's what I would say. Which is why it was necessary to form these common gods. Which is why it was necessary to form this common understanding.
That is how you unite the tribes who have, once again, domestic religions, the cult of the ancestors. So I have a tribe, Nikita has a tribe. We are both the eldest sons, meaning the chiefs of the tribes. How do we unite? We create common gods.
We produce an interior kingdom.
Exactly.
A collective interior kingdom.
Exactly.
Like we have done with this podcast, for example.
Wow.
And consider all that we've said so far. Does the salon not consist of certain rites, traditions, and rituals? Us walking onto the screen, us having a nice little refreshment, the scenery, the colors, the motifs on the mantle of the fireplace.
Voila.
Look, what are we sitting in front of? A fireplace, the fire of the ancestors. It's not lit right now. We have this.
So let's talk about the fire, by the way. What does the fire represent? We see at the Olympic Games, the Olympic flame. What does it represent? Well, in Virgil, in the Aeneid of Virgil,
yes.
Who is he? Aeneas,
yes.
The hero of Troy. He's a man who escaped the destruction of Troy by Agamemnon, king of the Greeks. And he was given the flame. The flame was considered as being the soul of the ancestors. In each Roman house, in each Greek house, you've had
a flame.
A flame.
Which was initiated by the founders.
That should never be
extinguished.
Never. Why? Because it represented the soul of the ancestors. And they've had rituals. So they would offer food for the flame.
They would present bread, cake in front of it, stuff like that. Oils, fats.
They would pray in front of the flame.
Yes.
So Aeneas, was given the flame before leaving Troy, and he went to what we call nowadays the Italic Peninsula, which is modern-day Italy, Rome. And that is how he founded Rome. Well, the flame represented the passing of time. It represented the connection between the ancestors and the yet-to-be-born. A man, an individual, a living man, a living individual was nothing more
than the sum, the consequence, The totality of every event which had occurred before him.
He was the protector.
Yes.
He was the one who was responsible of preserving
The flame.
the flame, which once again represents the connection between the dead and the yet to be born. And that is how society reproduced itself.
Yes.
With always bearing in mind that they are not just individuals, they are the custodians of a long tradition.
They're the keepers of the flame.
Why? To give it, to bequeath it
Yes.
to their descendants. Their goal, their main goal, is to bequeath an oral tradition, an oral domestic religion to their descendants.
Yes. Let's discuss that concept of death because it relates to the flame.
Yes.
Death is not just an event. It's not just, voila, you die. Death is when your name is no longer spoken. Death is when your flame is extinguished. The afterlife, therefore, for the ancestors, for those founders, for those people that ignited that flame, death was an eternal happiness.
Yes.
Death was an eternal happiness, but only so long as there was a progeny, meaning
Exactly.
a first son, who was able to preserve that flame, make sacrifices to it, pour the fats and oils upon it that was able to preserve it. Because what would happen if you did not preserve the flame? You would bring upon the wrath of the ancestors.
What is the meaning of death?
Death is when your name is no longer
When your name
is no longer spoken.
Exactly. No
Death
longer
is when
mentioned.
death is when your name is no longer spoken. Why would you bring upon the wrath of the ancestors once the flame is extinguished? Wrath of the ancestors doesn't mean there's going to be a zombie hand poking through the soil that's going to strangle you. That's not what it means. It's a metaphor. But you can feel the wrath of the ancestors. I'll tell you what, ancestors are like the roots of that are dug deep into the soil, which give rise to the branches that extend high into the sky. You can ask a botanist, but you don't even have to ask a botanist. Everybody knows. What happens if you remove a flower from its soil? Remove a flower from its roots. It withers and dies. This is the wrath of the ancestors. You can imagine, let's say you move into a new role into your company. You just get promoted into manager. The manager before you is somehow an ancestor. He is, at least in the sense that he is practiced in the customs and traditions which make him effective in his role, right? In order for you to be effective in that role, he needs to pass some of them down to you, let's say. And in the case that it is not passed down to you, you are more likely to struggle in your role. You are more prone. In the way that if you are to not uphold and heed those traditions which were successful, you will bring wrath upon yourself. And that is the essence of the wrath of the ancestors.
Or even a statesman.
Yes.
When you want to become a statesman, what do you need to do? What do you need to learn? First of all.
Statesmen, in the past at least, were historians.
Historians, why? Because you need to understand the work of your predecessors.
Yes. What are you building upon?
You need to understand the roots. You need to understand the essence of the work you're continuing.
The character of the soil, so on and so forth. History answers for us the question of how did we get here, and from here, where may we go?
Exactly.
That's the essence of history.
Completely. That is why you need to understand you need to understand that as a man, as the descendant of
every person that came before you,
thousands and thousands
every
of
man
people,
that held a sword on the field of battle,
or
a firearm,
even as I would say somebody who occupies a certain position in a big corporation, for example, you are not beginning a policy.
No.
You are continuing a policy.
Nope.
And for you to continue that policy and for you to proliferate that policy, you need to understand what your predecessors have established. There's a certain policy that doesn't die out with time. You are just an instrument of time.
Exactly.
You are just holding the sword that should be passed down to your successors in a family, in a corporation,
in a household,
in any position.
Yep.
You need to follow a certain policy that goes beyond yourself, and that is how man gives meaning to his life.
Exactly.
By giving allegiance, by being alleged to something bigger than his lifetime.
Something which is reverberated throughout the ages. Something more eternal.
Yes.
You are not the owner of the flame. You are not the owner of your house.
You are the custodian.
You are simply, yes, exactly. You are simply the custodian. The house is simply in your trust. The house belongs to the dead man.
It's a rent.
Exactly. The house belongs to the dead man.
And to the man yet to be born.
Yes, the dead men who built it and the unborn men who have yet to cherish
What's
it.
the difference between a politician and a statesman, Nikita?
It is that a politician thinks about the next election and that a statesman
Yes.
thinks about the next generation.
Exactly. That is what's lacking in the West in general. People who think of the next generation.
People who think in terms of generations.
We need people who
It's a shame. It's a shame that in the day of consumerism and commodities, neoliberalism, and so on, everything is available for purchase, and so people only think of next weekend.
We see many politicians like they are just advancing policies just to please the voters. Whatever. Oh, you want this, you want that. Well, we'll give you money. We'll
And
give
when
you
they
candies.
show up on interviews or conferences, it's to throw those catchwords and buzzwords, which will please the people.
What did Churchill say at the House of Commons before being elected? I have nothing to offer you except sweat, toil, tears, and blood.
That's a
He
statesman.
was saying, well, we could, I would say, try to avoid offering tears, blood, sweat, and voila, right? We could try to avoid that. But still, he was completely, I would say,
Devoted.
and even he was completely sober. He was completely sober-minded, and he didn't lie to the people. He didn't lie about his policy. He didn't lie about he didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. He told them what they should hear. And thank God, the British people had the common sense to follow Winston Churchill at, as he would describe it, their finest hours. Never in the history of man has so much been owed to so few.
Wow.
Battle of Britain.
Speaking in terms of the great generation, the greatest generation.
Completely.
Those men that produced
Greatest generation.
the most prosperous society
The one before the boomers.
that was ever known.
Yes. And so Fustel de Coulanges teaches us first and foremost to understand that we are not the ones who own the house.
We are simply the
We
custodians.
are not the ones who own the earth. We are not the ones who own the nation.
Or
We
the
are
company.
the custodians.
We are the trustees.
the trustees. We are
Yes.
the people who will be remembered to have preserved,
We have inherited the faith. We must pass it on.
either in our business, in our family, in our nation, in our state, in our country. We are custodians. We are not the ones who own it. We only reap the fruit of sacrifices, of toils, sweat, tears, and joys of our ancestors, our predecessors, and it is our duty to preserve it, and of course, to bequeath it to the next generations.
We sit in the shade of trees planted by old men, and it is up to us that when we are those old men, we will plant new trees.
Cheers.
We will plant new trees for the new generation, so that they may sit in their shade. But at that point, it is also up to us to ensure that the soil is of such a quality that we may plant and nourish those trees.
We can even see that in business, right? Like, who are the most successful businessmen? It's the ones who make long-term investments.
Exactly.
Well, yes, nowadays we can see people who bet on short terms, who invest in short terms, who don't think for the next couple of years even, not even generations. And that is why wealth isn't accumulated through certain people. How many people do we know, Nikita, personally, who have amassed vast amounts of money
Vast fortunes, yes.
and lost it just because they weren't thinking in terms of
Generations.
but just in terms of
Next weekend.
exactly.
No, I do know
Exactly.
people that have, for example, that hop onto the hype of Bitcoin or whatever, GameStop, Nvidia, whatever is popping off at the moment.
If you go to Europe, you see those big cathedrals, right? That
The Cologne Cathedral, for example, in Germany,
exactly,
which was built by illiterate peasants.
literal peasants who didn't even live up to see it
Completed.
right? You can see that those were people who thought in terms of generations. They
never saw the completion of the project that they devoted every ounce of sweat towards.
If you go into the Mediterranean, you can see olive oil, right? You can see olive trees.
Olive trees take centuries to grow.
Olive
They take
trees that
centuries to grow.
that were planted by men who knew that they were never going to taste its olive oil, but knew that their grand and great-grandchildren would have a taste out of it. And that is how greatness is measured. Well, a man, as Napoleon would say, is not measured from his feet to his head, but from his head to the skies. From his head to the highs. And I would interpret that in that certain analogy as being a man is measured by how he can surpass himself, surpassing himself by the next generations. I might not achieve that, but my future generation will achieve that. I set objectives that are not just for the next elections, but for the next generations. That is the essence of Fustel de Coulanges. Fustel de Coulanges teaches us that the cult of the city, the cult of the nation is first and foremost the cult of the ancestors. And
the cult of the founder, the cult of the essence.
Let's talk about the structure of societies, of Greek and Roman societies that were quite similar into their geography, into their genealogy. Of course, they were both Mediterranean societies that had mountainous areas, right? And still with agriculture. So the Roman and Greek societies have lots in common, especially from their gods. We've already discussed how the tribes united to become city-states into having, so you had the Paleas Athena, so you had the Athena of that city, you had the Athena of the other city. Just like today, you have the Virgin Mary, the Black Virgin Mary, you have the Virgin Mary of that city. For example, you have the Virgin Mary in Mexico, you have the Virgin Mary in Spain, you have the Black Virgin Mary. So those traditions still are instilled in people's mind nowadays without knowing it. It's a tradition from Indo-Europeans, from Greeks, from Romans. So that's how cities united. And therefore, cities, of course, in the Mediterranean were city-states. So there were places, hotspots of commerce. And the areas around them were agricultural spaces. Yeah. So the agricultural spaces used to feed the cities, and the cities used to open up to the world and to establish trade routes and explorations and so on. Foremost. Voilà. So Fustel de Coulanges talks about the development of any society, any city. So first, why are aristocrats aristocrats? Why?
Privileges are not simply inherited.
They're taken.
Privileges are taken. Even, we might say, stolen. Even, we might say, won in combat, won in confrontation. Let's go back to Achilles, right?
Yes.
Achilles is very problematic for the human race. Why? Because there is a part of your body named after Achilles. For as long as the human race exists, Achilles is going to exist.
Tendon d'Achille.
Yes, the Achilles tendon. There you go. We might say Achilles is privileged because, well, he is the son of a goddess, and therefore he is a demigod, and he's a talented warrior. Achilles, though, by becoming the king of the Myrmidons, that was his tribe,
yes,
he had to become a ruthless warrior, a man of intense and completely effective violence, a machine.
Exactly. Achilles represents the aristocracy at its
essence, at its finest.
Exactly.
At its purest
form. Now, why, according to Fustel de Coulanges, is the aristocrat privileged? Well,
he has earned it.
We could dissect it.
He has won it in combat.
Simply. According to Fustel de Coulanges, the aristocrat can trace his lineage,
his essence,
to the eldest son.
Yes.
And who is the eldest son? The guardian
of the flame.
Of the flame, of religion.
Of the faith.
So, the aristocrat is, so for example, we were born into a family, right? I'm the eldest son.
I'm the eldest son in my family too.
No, let's say we're in one family.
Okay.
Well, you're my brother. High five, brother. Nice. Salon, brother. Salon family. Wow. So, can I be the eldest son or
you are the eldest son?
Oh,
you're older than me.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, so, I'm the eldest son. Nikita's my brother. So, I have children. My eldest son will be the king because the tribe developed into a city-state. The city-state developed into a kingdom. Who's the king? My son. Voilà. What will become of Nikita? Louis XIV and his brother, le Duc d'Orléans. Well, Nikita will become an aristocrat. Nikita will become somebody whose descendants can trace themselves back to one of the eldest sons, who is our father. The
Salon.
Well, so Nikita's descendants are going to become aristocrats. Now, what happens in society? You have other people coming in, because when you create prosperity, it attracts people.
Yes. People want to engage in that.
So
prosperity.
people who are not part of the tribe,
who are not born to it, who are not kindling the flame, who are not inducted and
who have no
initiated.
kinship,
Yes.
right? They will come into our prosperous city-state that was first established by a family that developed itself into becoming a tribe. The tribe associated itself with other tribes and became a polis, a city-state. The city-state, through the association with other city-states and the union of religions, became a country. So that would attract foreigners. Foreigners would come, and that would be the development of the clients. Fustel de Coulanges talks about the clients.
The client, yes.
La clientèle. Who are the clients? The clients are people who are not part of the family, of the tribe.
Founders.
That is why there are not aristocrats. They become the commoners. Mm-hmm. So that is the origin, that is the essence of the commoners. The commoners are the people who are not part of the tribe that developed itself into the city, then the country, and who live on that soil.
They're not keepers of the flame. They're not initiated into the faith. They're not descended from the founders. They are people who have engrafted themselves, like you might engraft a branch onto a tree, into that. They're not initiated into it, though.
They're not part of the roots.
Yes.
They're part of the tree, but they have no connection to the roots.
They're part of the branches, even. They might represent some leaves here and there.
Completely.
But they're not the roots.
But let's remember, in the Roman society, during the Roman Republic and even Empire, who were the only people who were allowed to practice law?
Law was only available to be practiced by the patricians.
The patricians were the aristocrats.
The aristocrats.
The aristocrats were, as we've already explained,
the people that were associated with the founding of the city.
So they could trace their lineage to one of the eldest sons.
Yep.
Right. Why were only the patricians allowed to practice law? Why?
Because we've determined that each family consists of a domestic religion.
Yes.
Each domestic religion consists of rites, traditions, rituals, and a domestic law. Families accumulate. Yep.
So you mean that law was intrinsically linked to religion?
Yes.
So the only men that were allowed to practice law
were those who were initiated in the religion.
The religion.
Yes.
So religion comes from what? So law comes from what?
From religion.
So
and religion comes from a common ancestry.
So law comes from religion.
Yes. That is the essence of it.
Okay.
That is the essence of it.
So that is why the Roman patrician was the only one who was allowed to practice law.
Because they represented a broader representation of those people who were associated with the founding of the city. Therefore, its domestic religions and rituals, which expanded, formed that relation, the gens, which we'll touch on in a second. The gens, the clan, we might say. Therefore, those were the only people justified with the preservation of the flame and the execution of its laws.
So what was the gens? The gens, if you had, for example, Julius Caesar, from the Julia gens.
That was his clan.
Or Emperor Claudius, from the Claudia gens. The gens is the extended family.
Yes.
Which is the tribe.
Yes.
What is the extended family? It's a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've already discussed. So now you understand the role of the aristocracy. The aristocracy is all of those people who can trace their lineage back to one of the eldest son. The eldest son, who is the king. The king, first of all, the chief of the tribe. When the tribe expands, you have a polis, a city-state. When the city-state expands, you have a kingdom. And who's the king? He's just a descendant of the eldest sons. Who are the aristocrats? They are the descendants of the branches. So each aristocrat can trace his roots back into his lineage to one of the
founders, one of the eldest sons.
To one of the eldest sons.
Yes.
So then we have the clients. So the clients are, for example, people who come, we could say they have troubles into their own areas, their own countries.
They flee, they seek prosperity.
Exactly. So they come into that tribe's prosperous area. They are not part of the clan. They
They're
are
not
part
initiated.
of the gens.
They're not keepers of the flame.
So they're not initiated into the religion.
Yep.
So they become clients. What is a client? It's somebody who works on the land that is the property of the aristocrat, of the tribe that was there. So they become their clients. So if a client has a problem with the law, who defends him?
It is the patrician.
It is the patrician. Why?
Because the patrician is initiated in the religion. The patrician
Is
is
initiated in the religion. And why can he defend him?
because he is entrusted with the roots of the tree.
Yes, but why can he defend him in a litigation, in a legal, in a judicial litigation? Why?
Because laws arise from religion.
So who are the only people who can practice law?
The ones who are initiated into the religion, which is the founders, the descendants of the eldest sons, the keepers of the flame.
That is why the clients, and that is the development of serfdom, by the way.
Feudalism.
A feudalism. A feudal lord was responsible of the commoners.
Yep.
He was the one defending them in front of the king.
He entrusted them with their land.
Exactly. He was the one who could defend them in front of other lords because he knew the law, because he was part of the aristocracy, he was initiated into the religion, and therefore he could practice law. Because, let's say it one more time, law is a consequence of the religion. The religion is a consequence of the lineage. Therefore, there is another strata of society that will develop itself, which is the slave. The slave would be the people working for the clients.
Yes.
The clients would own land. The clients would work, first of all, on the land. Then they would grow. And by growing, they would ask for more rights. And we've seen that in Fustel de Coulanges. He explains it. How Cato the Elder, for example, advocates for the establishment of more rights for the clientele, the clients. The clients would grow and grow and grow. And at a certain point, for example, in Roman history, they would be admitted at the Senate.
Yes.
So the clients would be admitted at the Senate. So the clients would therefore become aristocrats. So the clients, that's the development of the bourgeoisie, we could even say. The bourgeoisie developed itself through that way. Les idées des Lumières, the Age of Enlightenment, was nothing more than the revolutionary spirit and impulses of the clients against the aristocracy. And therefore, that's a great thought, isn't it? And therefore, we could say that life is a circle. It's a circle. First, you have the family, the tribe, they create prosperity, the clients come, the clients just become predominant, they ask the rights of the aristocracy, they become the aristocracy, then the cult is lost. Because
it degenerates.
It degenerates.
The flame is no longer preserved.
So Oswald Spengler talks about it a lot. The establishment of the empire. First of all, it's an ID, it's a clan, it's a tribe. For example, Alexander the Great. What was Alexander the Great? Or we could even say Napoleon. So Alexander the Great just took the ideas of ancient Greece and just propagated it into Asia.
Yes.
And into Europe. Napoleon took the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment,
yes,
and propagated those ideas into even to Russia nowadays.
He waged an imperialist war in the name of liberalism.
Exactly. So that is when, that is so contradicting.
Yeah.
But still, it's an oxymoron. but still. So there's the nation that develops itself, we could say, into a cult. Or we could even say, around the cult. We could say there's a nation that develops itself around the cult. That cult expands into becoming a country. The country then would, with its soft power, meaning its ideas and
its own rights, traditions, and rituals.
It would, for example, nowadays, right? The British Empire, right? Lots of their ideas and systems and modes of governing
are prevalent in the new continent.
In every continent, like even the parliament. What do we call Westminster? The mother of all parliaments.
Yes.
So it's an idea that comes from the British Islands. Even we could even say from the Viking era, right?
From King Arthur and his round table.
For example.
Yes.
Or we could say that the civil code, le code civil, the Napoleonic code, as we used to call it, was propagated by the sword of Napoleon.
Laws represent, we touched on it even in Hobbes, but laws represent simply the transfiguration of the domestic religion.
So that is when does a nation becomes an empire? When its institutions that come from its religion become universal.
Founding families, yes.
It becomes universal.
When the founding families imbue their essence upon the others through the institutionalization and codification of their domestic religion. It is an initiation of all citizenship. In that sense, consider citizenship.
Yes.
That's why there's a ceremony and everything. A citizenship ceremony is your initiation into the nation. It's your initiation into being able to practice the laws, into being able to even hold a stake of ownership in the land, into the direction of that sailing ship, which is the nation, which is the state.
And what was the land? The land was delimited by certain boards, by certain, I would say,
boundaries.
Yes. And the boundaries were sacred. So the land was associated, according to Fustel de Coulanges, into something holy. It was the ground where the ancestors were buried, first of all. It was the ground where the individual himself would be buried.
And this is even where we get the modern idea of private property from.
Exactly. Yes. That's the ideas of
John Locke.
John Locke.
John Locke.
John Locke's ideas come from Fustel de Coulanges. John Locke's ideas come from
ancient classics,
the Indo-Europeans, without knowing them. By the way, you need to understand that everything we're doing on that channel is we're literally going into the details of how we think without even knowing it.
Yep.
We all have a certain inner kingdom, and we're just dissecting in a world that is full of deconstruction.
We are reconstructing.
We are reconstruction.
In a world that seeks to strip down, we are restoring.
Completely.
Yes.
And that is the purpose
of
the Friday
Salon. Voila.
The Vendredi Salon. Okay. High five.
I did say voila, but it's not voila time. It's not voila time just yet. Because we're on a very good idea about private property.
Yes, please go ahead.
Terra patria.
Si.
Fatherless. That's the Latin. Terra patria, which means fatherland. And why would you call it your fatherland? I want to go into that word pater, paternal.
Pater, familia.
Yes, right? Pater does not mean, you can think of paternal, padre, for example. It appears not just in these Latin languages, but even in Indian languages.
Even in Dostoevsky, he talks about, in Crime and Punishment, he talks about how Raskolnikov, the main character, he's called the father. In Russia, according to Dostoevsky, they call a man father. You see?
Father. Pater. And the meaning of the word pater, believe it or not, is not actually father. It doesn't mean that from whom I descend. The word pater is more related to the word rex, which means master, leader, but even majestic dignity.
Yes.
That is the meaning of the word pater. And why would you relate that, or the root, the racine, the Latin racine, pater? Why would we relate that to the father?
Like, yes, we could say God the Father. What is God the Father?
It's a majestic dignity.
I would say God the Father is the accumulation of all our fathers.
Yep.
God the Father is the transcendental Father that we have, represented by our Father, ourselves.
Your father is the representative of all your ancestors.
Completely.
All your ancestors.
He's the ambassador of your lineage.
Of every man that came before him.
Completely.
And you, in some sense, you are the same. One day you will be the representative of your own father, to your own son, to your child, to your daughter. You'll be the keeper of your flame. Consider that. Isn't that something to live up to?
You do not only live for yourself and to scroll on your phone all day, you see?
Or to pass your time with fleeting vanities.
You are the product of toil, sweat, pain, famine, survival.
In each one of us,
bravery.
In each one of us, there are 1,000 epics and 1,000 sagas.
Give me. I need to take notes.
My notebook is over there.
In each one. Oh, come, sit down. Sit down.
Okay, we'll make a.
Wait. In each one of us, there's 1,000 epics and 1,000 sagas.
And somehow I think we're writing our own saga right now. Humbly. Humbly, I'm writing a saga.
Well, anyways.
So, terra patria, we've determined that pater means majestic dignity. And why is that? Oh, that we would relate that to the fatherland. Why would we describe the land? In the modern mind, we might just view it as a patch of dirt. A patch of dirt. Why would we call that the fatherland? Why would we relate the dirt to our majestic dignity? The answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question, why would men ever fight for dirt? Why would men go to war against each other for land? And the reason is, we discussed this once when reviewing,
I remember.
Yes, when we were talking about Dimitris Mitropanos.
Because your land is your sustenance.
Your land produces the fruits which allow you to feed your family,
Exactly.
which allow you to build the flame and preserve the flame and establish the fireplace around it, establish the hall around it, establish the home around it, so the rain does not fall upon your children, but that there is a roof upon them. Your land is your sustenance, and it is for that reason that men would used to go to war against each other. It was their route and their
We could even say, in lots of Eastern countries, they say that your mother is your country.
Because your mother nourishes you.
We could even say that we're nourished from the land.
And we are shielded by her borders.
But who fertilizes the land?
It is
Who?
the man.
Just tell me, who?
It is the one who toils the soil.
Who fertilizes
It is the farmer, the man who wakes up by the sound of the rooster.
Who fertilizes the land?
The man.
Who fertilizes woman?
The man.
So woman is like land.
Yes.
Once
Gives
you
way to
lose
life.
your land, what do you lose?
You lose your woman.
Why? Because you've lost your sustenance.
Sustenance.
You've lost your independence.
Your reproductive capacity.
Exactly.
Your ability to prolong that domestic religion. And it's why, for example, in Greece and in Rome and in India, celibacy was banned. Celibacy
Yes.
by law was banned because it was an anathema to the preservation of the religion, to the proliferation of the state, to the expansion of the domestic religion. And we might also say, one thing that you taught me that's really resonated with me ever since is that you said, a man's country is not where he is born. A man's country is where he is buried. Because we were saying the ancestors are like gods. So wherever he is buried, that is the land over which he is forever the supervisor. That is the land over which he is forever surveying. He is the smoke in the air which arises from the eternal flame.
Beautiful. We do have our flame here.
It's a digital flame, but it's a flame nevertheless.
Yes. Wow. Whatever. So, let's talk about marriage.
Because, as we said, marriage is essential to the prolongation of the domestic religion of the family.
What was marriage, according to Fustel de Coulanges, into Indo-European societies, then afterwards into Greek and Roman societies?
So,
what was that about?
If family is a religion, marriage is the ceremony whereby the wife is initiated into the religion of the eldest son.
First of all, it's an initiation.
It's an induction, yes.
Right. So Fustel de Coulanges used to say that according to Indo-Europeans, and again, meaning Greeks and Roman societies, you could become the son of a man by simply, for example, we know that Octavian wasn't the biological son of Caesar.
He was not.
But why was he his son? Because he adopted his cult. He adopted his family cult.
He was most practiced in the religion, the faith, the history, the rites, and the rituals.
That is why Octavian became the legal son of Caesar. Octavian was initiated into the cult of the Julia gens.
The Julia gens.
Octavian was the legal son of Julius Caesar because he was initiated into the religion of Julius Caesar. And a marriage is the initiation of a woman into her future husband's domestic religion. So you have a domestic religion and you have a religion that unites the whole society, that is common to everyone.
Which nowadays is embodied by laws. Laws, courtroom proceedings, things of those nature represent a type of, they are the religion the religious rights of the secular society. Though the society is secular, don't be deceived by the fact that the society is secular. There are still certain rights, nevertheless, procedures, binding documents, texts, which embody and carry the essence through the ages.
Ancient lawyers,
the
Roman
patricians,
exactly,
yes.
patricians, they used to talk into courtrooms. They used to hold a magic wand, you could call it, a Harry Potter wand.
Or even the scepter, which to this day is a symbol of legislative power.
They used to hold a wand and recite a formula word by word, because the judicial system was intrinsically linked to the religious system. It was a consequence of it. And Fustel de Coulanges helps us understand the structure, the essence of our societies. The development of it, from a family to a tribe to a country, the development of the clients have slaves, the clients revolt, the clients take the place of the patricians, the slaves take the place of the clients, and it's just a turning point,
I say it in every episode, I think. Revolution.
It's a wheel.
Remember what the word revolution means. Turning.
To revolve.
Yep.
180 degrees. The wheel of history. And today I could say...
Another excellent conversation held in the salon. Held around our eternal flame.
Completely.
One full of its own rights, traditions, and rituals.
See, we have maintained the flame.
We've maintained the flame.
As always, and as should you. Maintain the flame.
And you know who you need to help you maintain that flame? You need Fustel de Coulange, you need his book, The Ancient City. This book reveals not just about politics, but about organization, leadership, culture, practices, traditions. This book will illuminate every aspect.
And what do we have in our description?
A link. There's a link in our description, our favorite edition of that book, of Fustel de Coulange's Ancient City, the preeminent scholar of the classics, one who talks about rites, traditions, and rituals.
So to that we would say preserve the flame, either in your family, in your domestic household,
in your corporation, in your private life, your professional life,
businesses. You are just the custodian of a long-lasting and standing
You are just
policy.
the trustee. You are just the trustee. You are the bearer of the rites, traditions, and rituals.
Rent is due.
Rent is due. Pay it up. Pay it up with the rites, rituals, and traditions. We initiated this session of the salon with a certain rite, which is we walked in, the music was playing, we shook hands, we took a sip, and we have one more rite to close it. And that rite is initiated with a certain word that begins with the letter V.
Voila!
Voila! Voila! Voila! Voila! Voila! Qui je suis,
mais voilà mes années suffisent. C'est mes rêves, c'est mon vie, mes voix sont vives.
Voila! Voila!